There was once a man named Marcus the Wanderer, and on the surface he had everything: a successful career, a comfortable home, friends who called him regularly. Yet every morning he woke with a hollow ache in his chest, a voice whispering that none of it mattered. What if I told you that this exact feeling, this profound emptiness, was not a sign of weakness, but the catalyst for the most important transformation of his life? Marcus was living what ancient philosophers called the slumber of the soul, where external victories masked an internal bankruptcy of purpose. And he spent years collecting achievements like a merchant hoards gold, only to find that each acquisition left him feeling more empty than before. His days blurred together in a suffocating routine: wake, work, sleep, repeat. And somewhere along this treadmill of existence, he stopped asking the fundamental question that separates those who merely exist from those who truly live. Why am I doing this? This is the story of how Marcus discovered that the answer to "what's the point" was hidden not in the pursuit of more, but in the courage to stop and reckon with his own mortality. One evening, after another hollow victory at work, Marcus sat on his apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars, and something shifted. He realized he couldn't remember the last time he felt genuinely alive, truly present, authentically himself. And that realization cracked something open inside him, a fissure through which truth began to pour. He began to understand that his pointlessness wasn't a personal failing, but a wake-up call, a cosmic tap on the shoulder, reminding him that life without meaning is like a ship without a rudder. And he stood up that night with an unshakable conviction. He would discover what actually mattered, no matter the cost. The next morning, Marcus made a decision that terrified him. He decided to leave everything behind, not permanently, but to take a sabbatical from his carefully constructed life. And this decision unleashed a storm of resistance from within and without. His friends thought he was losing his mind, his family questioned his stability, and his mind screamed warnings about wasted potential and missed opportunities. Yet beneath all this noise, something deeper than fear was awakening. A hunger for truth, so intense it burned away the paralysis that had held him captive for years. He spent months traveling to remote monasteries, speaking with philosophers, sitting with monks in silence, and everywhere he went, he asked the same burning question to anyone who would listen. How do you find meaning when the world tells you nothing matters? And the answers he received were not what he expected. They weren't grand philosophies or complicated formulas, but simple, devastating truths that crumbled his old assumptions like ancient walls finally giving way. An old monk in Tibet told him something that stopped him cold. You seek meaning outside yourself, yet meaning is not found. It is created through the choices you make when no one is watching, through the small acts of courage you perform in the face of indifference. A street artist in Barcelona showed him something equally profound. She painted murals that would eventually fade and disappear, yet she painted with such joy and presence that Marcus understood for the first time that the impermanence of our work doesn't diminish its value, it sanctifies it. A single mother he met in Peru spoke of raising her child in poverty, and with tears in her eyes she said, "I have little to give my daughter except my full presence and my fierce commitment to her becoming, and somehow that has become everything." Marcus felt the weight of these encounters pressing down on him like 1,000 hands, pushing him closer to truth. And with each passing week, he began to understand that the question, "What's the point?" only had power when he believed the answer lay somewhere external, waiting to be discovered like buried treasure. But when he flipped the question, when he began asking, "What point do I choose to create?" everything transformed. And the fog that had strangled his spirit for years began to lift, revealing not enlightenment exactly, but something more practical and powerful: clarity about what actually deserved his finite attention and energy. Returning home, Marcus was not the same man who had left, and this transformation was quiet but unmistakable. He still had his job, his apartment, his friends, but he no longer served them with the desperation of someone seeking external validation to fill an internal void. Instead, he began asking different questions. How can I do this work in a way that serves something larger than myself? Which relationships nourish both me and the other person? How am I spending the currency of my life, and is it worth the exchange? He realized that meaninglessness doesn't come from external circumstances, it comes from the surrender of agency, from the belief that you are a passenger in your own life rather than the author of it. He started mentoring young people who felt lost, not to save them, but to walk alongside them in their search. He redesigned his work to focus on projects that moved him genuinely rather than those that merely impressed. He learned to say no without guilt and yes without fear. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, his life became saturated with purpose, not because everything changed, but because his relationship to everything changed. The great ancient philosophers called this state eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but better understood as flourishing, as the deep satisfaction of becoming who you were always capable of being. And Marcus experienced this not as a permanent state, but as a skill he practiced daily, choosing meaning in small moments and large ones alike. What Marcus had discovered in his dark night of the soul was this timeless truth. The feeling of pointlessness is not life's cruelty, but life's invitation, an opportunity to wake up from the hypnosis of autopilot and take conscious responsibility for the direction of your days. And this is the threshold you now stand upon. The question is not whether your life has meaning, but whether you have the courage to author it. So here's what I want you to do. Starting today, not someday, take 1 hour this week to sit in silence and ask yourself the real questions. What am I actually here to do? What small thing could I do tomorrow that would make me feel genuinely alive? Which relationships deserve my presence and which drain my energy? Write your answers down, not as grand declarations, but as honest investigations. And then take one action, just one, that aligns with what you discover. Choose to mentor someone, to create something, to show up more fully, to say no to what doesn't matter. Because meaning is not waiting for you in some distant future. It's waiting in the choices you make today, in the person you become through those choices. And that, my friend, is the entire point.